Christians in Motion.
This is one of those verses that I feel gets taken straight out of context sometimes, you know? What now?
But when they call themselves a Christian page and they're posting things that completely go against the Bible, that's where I take issue.
This is not what that verse is saying at all.
Hey everybody, Kristen here. Welcome back to the Christians in Motion podcast. We are on episode 17. So thank y'all for tuning in and stopping by. I'm glad y'all are here. So just the other day, a friend of mine shared an article in a private discussion group and wanted people's thoughts on it. And I'm in this group. And I knew exactly what it was going to be before I even opened it up, before I even read it. The title was, "This man asked a simple question online that shut down the whole anti-abortion argument." And I knew exactly what it was going to be before I even opened up the article. I knew it was going to be the burning IVF situation. This guy created a hypothetical ethical conundrum in order to discredit the pro-life movement as a whole. This has been going around for quite some time. I really honestly thought that this would just kind of die out because it's ridiculous. But just like the whole trolley situation, this just keeps coming back around and around and around. So we're going to talk about it today. Okay, so to get started, I think the best thing to do is just to read what he wrote and then go from there. So this guy's name who presented this scenario on Twitter, his name is Patrick S. Tomlinson. He is an author of the Ark trilogy, from what I understand is science fiction. So he presented this whole pro-choice argument, this scenario on Twitter. It's a series of 9 tweets. So I thought we would just begin by reading these 9 tweets. And Bored Panda, this is where this article was shared. So just keep this in mind that this is shared on Bored Panda. And Bored Panda says, in a thread of just 9 genius tweets, Tomlinson asked one simple question. And this is the question that completely shut down the anti-abortion argument. So let's just start by reading it, okay? So, Patrick S. Tomlinson, who is at Stealthy Geek on Twitter, he writes, quote, "Whenever abortion comes up, I have a question I've been asking for 10 years now of the life begins at conception crowd. In 10 years, no one has ever answered it honestly. It's a simple scenario with 2 outcomes. No one ever wants to pick one because the correct answer destroys their argument. Ooh. There is a correct answer, which is why the pro-life crowd hates this question. Here it is. You're in a fertility clinic. Why isn't important. The fire alarm goes off. You run for the exit. As you run down this hallway, you hear a child screaming from behind a door. You throw open the door and find a 5-year-old child crying for help. There in one corner of the room, in the other corner, you spot a frozen container labeled 1,000 viable human embryos. The smoke is rising. You start to choke. You know you can grab one or the other, but not both before you succumb to smoke inhalation and die, saving no one. Yikes. Do you A, save the child, or B, save the 1,000 embryos? There is no C. C means you all die. In a decade of arguing with anti-abortion people about the definition of human life, I have never gotten a single straight A or B answer to this question, and I never will. They will never answer honestly because we all instinctively understand the right answer is A. A human child is worth more than 1,000 embryos, or 10,000, or 1,000,000, because they are not the same, not morally, not ethically, not biologically. This question absolutely eviscerates their argument, and their refusal to answer confirms that they know it is to be true. No one anywhere actually believes an embryo is equivalent to a child. This person does not exist. They are lying to you. They are lying to you to try and evoke an emotional response, a paternal response, using false equivalency. No one believes life begins at conception. No one believes embryos are babies or children. Those who claim to are trying to manipulate you so they can control women. Don't, this is my favorite tweet. Don't let them. Use this question to call them out. Reveal them for what they are. Demand they answer your question, and when they don't, slap that big old scarlet P of the patriarchy on them. The end. And that's end quote. Okay. So, that last part is my absolute favorite. Slap the giant scarlet P of the patriarchy. You know, I was always wondering how one gets to become a part of the patriarchy. Apparently, it's being pro-life. So I guess I'm a part of the patriarchy now. I thought I had to get accepted in by an old white man, but apparently just believing that life begins at conception makes you a part of the patriarchy. So that's cool. Okay, so I have to begin with this, his lack of understanding of embryology. If I saw a container marked 1,000 viable human embryos, I would instantly know that that container was incorrectly labeled. An embryo is generally 2 to 8 weeks gestational age. We're talking about human embryos here. And viability, in regards to pregnancy, is the moment when a child can be born and survive outside of the mother's womb. Scientific consensus is that the point of viability is roughly 24 weeks gestational age. Therefore, an embryo is not viable. And this is why in the discussion of abortion, biology matters, science matters, embryology matters. I don't expect everybody to be an expert on this topic, but if you're going to try to back pro-lifers into a corner, you should probably know what you're talking about. So an embryo in its very nature cannot be viable. It's too young gestationally. So I just had to point that out. I would also like to point out that he's being dishonest. Patrick S. Tomlinson is being dishonest. He said that nobody has ever answered this question, when in fact people have answered this question and they've answered it honestly. So he's being dishonest. As a matter of fact, some of the people that have tried to explain why they would pick the option that they picked, when they try to get into an actual conversation with him, he will block them on Twitter. And so that leads me to believe that not only is he being dishonest, but that he wants to toss a grenade and walk away. He wants to make his point and try to shut us down, but then put his fingers in his ears and completely ignore the opposition. That's not how growth happens. That's not how we learn. That's not how we come to understand people that see things differently than we do. So I just have to point that out, that he's being completely dishonest, saying that he completely shuts down pro-lifers with this question as if we just walk away and are unwilling to answer. And that's a lie. Lots of pro-lifers have answered his question. And the funny thing is, in this article, there are responses to his question. So from the get-go, from his very first tweet, he's being completely dishonest. I just have to point that out. Okay, so let's just go through the series of tweets. So, okay, we're in this fertility clinic. Why isn't it important? I think the why is very important, because when people create these hypothetical ethical conundrums, they are almost always completely absurd. I want to know why I am in a fertility clinic alone with a child. Where's this child's parents? Did they just run off without him? Do I need to make a CPS report? Why have first responders not been called? Why are embryos being left out where somebody like me could just pick them up and grab them? What I want to know what's going on. Because see, that's the problem with creating hypotheticals, is more often than not, they are like very unlikely to ever happen. When would you ever be in a situation like this? Never. Okay, so he reiterates once again that he will never, ever get an honest response that us pro-lifers, we will never answer. Well, I'm going to do it right now. He says that we instinctively know to pick the child, that a human child is worth more than 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000 embryos. And he goes on to say, and I think this is important, because they are not the same, not morally, not ethically, not biologically. And like I said just a few moments ago, this is why I think that in the great abortion debate, biology matters, and science matters, and embryology matters. Because no, a 2-week-old embryo is not the same as a 5-year-old child. And I don't think anybody's arguing that they are. Just to give you an example, if I found out I was pregnant and then had a miscarriage at say 6 weeks, I would be upset. If I had to bury one of my daughters, that would be a bit of a different situation. Of course, we realize that there is a distinction between the two. Morally, yes, but biologically, absolutely. But again, it's interesting to me that he talks about biological differences when he doesn't actually seem to know the difference between a viable fetus and an embryo. But anyway, he says that his question absolutely destroys our arguments. No, it doesn't. First of all, this is incredibly arrogant on his point. I hate when people do this, and I've had it happen to me so many times. People think that they can just toss out these little cliches or hypothetical situations and just completely shut us down. Like years and years and years of abortion debate, and you're going to end it? How prideful, how arrogant are you? Like, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine years ago, and abortion came up, and she was like, well, abortion is it's simply a woman's choice. That's it. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess you have the final say. Like there's nothing else that can be said about this. And I feel like he's kind of displaying that same arrogance. Like it's simple. It's simple. Okay. An IVF clinic is on fire. Okay. It's really that simple. And no, it's not. And the fact that he's so prideful to think that he can just shut down the pro-life argument altogether, like this is the end of the debate, that really shows how prideful he is. But no, he has not destroyed the pro-life argument, because the reality is the question is not and should not be, is a 5-year-old more valuable than an embryo? The question should be, is an embryo valuable? And the answer is yes. In his series of tweets, he refers to these embryos as human embryos. So you're admitting that they are human. And even though you incorrectly called them viable, I'm assuming what you meant to say is that they were living embryos. So if they're human and they're alive, are you saying that they don't have value? The secular pro-life individual would tell you that by simply being human, by simply having human DNA, that gives you value. As Christian pro-lifers, we would say that being made in the image of God, that gives you value. An embryo, a fetus, a child in the womb has value because God says that it does. And that's where I go to. Now, obviously, that's keeping the gospel at the core of the pro-life movement. And I've said before, I'm perfectly fine standing shoulder to shoulder with the pro-life secularist and the pro-life atheist. I will gladly stand beside you to defend the lives of the unborn. But from my perspective, from my worldview, these children in the womb have value, again, because they're made in the image of God, and God says that they have value because they're made in his image. In his series of tweets, on tweet 7, he goes on to say, no one anywhere actually believes an embryo is equivalent to a child. This person does not exist. They are lying to you. Okay, you are correct, Patrick Tomlinson, writer of science fiction. You are correct. I don't think that an embryo and a 5-year-old are the same thing, just like I don't think a 5-year-old and a 30-year-old are the same thing, just like I don't think a man and a woman are the same thing, and I don't think that apples and oranges are the same thing, because God is a God of order, and he's a God of distinction, and things are different in the world we live in. There are distinctions, there is order, and that's a good thing. So yes, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to assume your gender, but yes, there are distinctions between an embryo and a 5-year-old. Duh. But again, this doesn't answer the question of whether or not an embryo has value. This doesn't answer the question of whether or not abortion is ethical. All you're saying is that you think a 5-year-old is more important than an embryo. That doesn't say anything about the ethics of abortion. Okay, so since everybody loves to play the hypothetical game, so if a building's on fire and there's a 5-year-old and a 97-year-old in there, and I can only save one, am I a terrible person if I let the 97-year-old die? Does it mean I don't value his life? Of course not. It means that I recognize that the 97-year-old, he's an old man who's lived his life. He likely has one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. He's probably going to sashay off this earth and go home to be with the Lord in a few years anyway. I would save the child. And I think most 97-year-olds would say, save the child. Let me die. I can't think of too many people that are that old that would say, let a 5-year-old die so that I can have another year or two on this earth. And again, it's not to say that I don't value the elderly, but if I had to make a choice between a 5-year-old and a 97-year-old, I'm going to let the 5-year-old live. But the big problem with his series of tweets is that in the case of abortion, we're not choosing between a child in a womb and a child outside of the womb. We're choosing between the life and death of the child in the womb. It's not like whenever a baby is carried to term, a 5-year-old dies. That's not what happens. We're also not choosing between the child's life and the mother's life. There's a good chance that you carrying your baby to term is not going to kill you. I mean, frankly, yes, it used to be that many women would die in childbirth. That's not the case anymore. With modern medicine, it's pretty rare that women die in childbirth. So no one's asking to choose between the life of your child and the life of you. It's not like you're going to deliver your baby and then we're going to kill you. That's not what anyone is saying. But anyway, moving on, he says that we're using false equivalency. No, we're not. Again, this is why I say biology matters in the discussion of abortion. Of course, we recognize that an embryo and a child are not the same thing. Who's saying that? I want to know what pro-lifer is saying that there is absolutely no biological distinction between a 2-week-old embryo and a 1-month-old baby that's been born. Who's saying that? Nobody. I think he's making this up. But furthermore, he claims that we're the ones that are lying when he's been dishonest about a lot already. But what really kills me is that in this series of tweets, he says that we are the ones trying to evoke an emotional and paternal response. That's If that ain't the pot calling the kettle black. Does this sound familiar? Okay, so abortion is wrong. But what about in cases of rape? You know why people bring up cases of rape when talking about abortion? Because they want you to see women who have abortions as nothing but victims. The reality is, most abortions are not because of rape. It is not because a woman is carrying a rape-conceived child in her womb. That is not the vast majority of abortions. As a matter of fact, they make up a tiny fraction of abortions. Most abortions are women that do not want to be inconvenienced with a pregnancy. That's it. It is the pro-choicers that like to paint women as victims of their circumstances instead of perpetrators of violence who walk into abortion clinics and deliberately and purposely kill their unborn children. It is the pro-choicers who are very careful in the language that they use, saying things like remove the pregnancy or terminate the pregnancy instead of kill the baby. It is the pro-choicers that tiptoe around the discussion of abortion because they know what they are doing. It is the pro-choicers that try to hide the videos from clinics like Planned Parenthood of things like selling baby parts for profit. And I'm not even sorry. It is the pro-choicers that continually use fallacious arguments and inconsistent logic to argue their point. There is not a single good argument to support abortion. They know it, we know it, and this is why they have to come up with these ridiculous, hypothetical, completely absurd ethical conundrums that will never ever happen to try to shut us up. Because they know truth is on our side, science is on our side, biology is on our side, and coming from all these these pro-choice secularists that are supposedly so pro-science, how do you deny the humanity and the life of a child in the womb and call yourself pro-science? That doesn't make any sense. Look, you can use whatever terminology you want to, but it doesn't matter. What is inside a pregnant woman's uterus? Two things have to be true. Number one, it is human, as you said in your series of tweets. It has to be human. It can't be anything else, right? Because a human man and a human woman cannot create something that is non-human. Dogs give birth to dogs, and cats give birth to cats, and humans give birth to humans. I don't know the last time a woman went into labor and went to the hospital and gave birth to a chameleon. It doesn't happen. It has to be human. Second, it has to be alive, because if it wasn't alive, it would be dead, and then it would be considered a miscarriage. But do you want to know something really interesting? They say that if you are ever kidnapped and you think that the person kidnapping you is going to hurt you, maybe even kill you, one of the best things you can do is continually speak your name. Tell them what your name is. Tell them what your children's name is. Humanize yourself. That is one of the best things you can do, because a person that is going to commit an act of violence against you, they don't want to see you as human. So continually remind them that you are. I read that in a book, so it's true. I read it. It's great. It's true. But throughout history, some of the worst acts of violence, some of the greatest atrocities that have ever happened, one thing that it consistently happens is the victims of detestable crimes were dehumanized. Take the Holocaust, for example. What was Adolf Hitler trying to do? He was trying to create a superior race. He wanted to dehumanize the Jews and make them nothing more but a leech and a burden on society. They were what was dragging society down. He wanted to dehumanize them, and that's what made it easier for him to do what he was doing. That's why people were given numbers in the concentration camps. They didn't call them by their name, because to call them by their name would be to humanize them. It's pretty simple. And so when we dehumanize children in the womb, it's the same exact thing. It is so much easier to destroy a child in the womb if we don't see them as human. But anyway, he goes on to say that no one believes that life begins at conception. No one believes that embryos are babies or children. Okay, these are two separate statements. First of all, believing that life begins at conception, that is actually an incredibly consistent and science-based view. But to say that we can distinguish between a baby and an embryo, that does not negate our argument that life begins at conception. Because again, we're not talking, you're just saying that a child is different than an embryo. That does not remove any sort of value from the embryo. But then he goes on to say that those who claim we claim that life begins at conception, that we are just trying to manipulate you so that we can control women. Because that's my mission in life, right? Because I'm part of the patriarchy, I guess. I didn't know that women could be a part of the patriarchy. That's news to me, so thank you for cluing me in. We just want to control women. This is what I have such a hard time understanding. Since the sexual revolution that happened with the second wave of feminism, birth control has become readily available. You can go to your doctor without any questions asked and get a contraceptive pill so that you don't become pregnant. This prevents pregnancy from happening. Now, I think it's worth noting that these birth control pills that you love so much, they are a level 1 carcinogen, and there is a link between birth control pills and breast and cervical cancer. So just worth noting that birth control pills, they're the same level as tobacco and asbestos. So just throwing that out there. But even if you don't have insurance and you cannot get prescription birth control from your doctor, you can literally go to any CVS, any drugstore, any Walmart, Target, for crying out loud, you can go to a gas station and get a box of condoms. Condoms are very easy to get. You can even get them in bulk online. They're cheap, they're easy to use, and not only do they prevent pregnancy, but they're also really great at preventing STDs. And okay, we're all adults here. That's our preferred method of birth control. Right now, my husband and I, we are not ready to have a third baby, and condoms work really well. They're easy to find and they're cheap, and I don't understand what the huge problem is. That, like I said, that is our primary method of birth control, and that's what we've been using for 3 years now. And surprise, surprise, I haven't gotten pregnant. But if I were to get pregnant, because I mean, even though condoms are like 99% effective at preventing pregnancy, there is always that slight chance, you get a damaged condom or whatever, and whoops, you're pregnant. If I were to get pregnant, my solution would not be to run to my nearest Planned Parenthood and have an abortion. My solution would be, we're adults. We are adults that are engaging in a sexual relationship because we are husband and wife. So yes, obviously we are intimate. I would carry that baby to term and then birth it, and then we would raise that child together. We would not abort that child for any reason. And honestly, if we were in such a difficult situation that if me becoming pregnant would just be disastrous for our family, then truth be told, I think that we would just find other ways to be intimate. And I mean, that's the other thing too, is people they lose their minds if you suggest, just not having sex if you cannot have a baby. But if you knew, if both you and your spouse were out of work, there was no money coming in, and you getting pregnant would just be awful, well, then maybe don't have sex for a time. Find other ways to be intimate with one another. I'm just throwing that out there. But again, we don't want to tell women to take some responsibility for their own sexuality. So instead, they get to run to the nearest abortion clinic and throw their child into a hazmat container. Great. So as we come to wrap this up, this hypothetical ethical conundrum, it is a non-argument. But even though it's a non-argument, since he claims that in 10 whole years, not a single pro-life individual can answer his question, I'm going to do it today because I'm a good sport. For the record, if this was a real situation and I could only choose between saving a 5-year-old or a petri dish full of embryos, yes, I would save the 5-year-old child. That's it. I guess I'm pro-choice now, except not. There's a couple different reasons why I would choose the 5-year-old over the petri dish full of embryos. Number one, he says that this child is cowering in a corner, which they probably would be, because a 5-year-old, unlike an embryo, can experience fear. They see the flames and the smoke, and they're scared. An embryo cannot experience fear in that way. I don't even think babies can really experience fear. I think that type of like self-awareness and awareness of your surroundings, I don't think that even happens until later in life. Just to give a quick example, like when I was pretty little, I hit my head off a coffee table and my mom had to take me to the emergency room. And she said, like, the doctor and the nurses that were stitching me up, they got really upset because I just kind of laid there as they were doing my stitches. But I was very, very young, and I don't think I knew enough to be afraid. Like, oh, my head split open, and now I'm gushing blood, and I need stitches. I didn't think I knew enough to be afraid. And if you actually study child development, things like depth perception. Why can't I talk? Because I've been talking too long. That's why. Depth perception. That doesn't happen until later in development. Like they actually did a study with toddlers where they created like a mat that it almost looked like if you stepped on this mat, you would fall into a hole. Like it was kind of like an optical illusion. Now babies would just crawl right over this mat because they had no idea that there was a possibility that they could fall. But with older toddlers, you could see their hesitance, right? So things like fear and perception, self-awareness, that's something that has to be developed. Babies don't really understand, like they're not fearful, right? That's why, like if you leave a baby with grandma or grandpa, they're usually cool. But try dropping your 4-year-old off with grandma and leave. Where's mommy? When's mommy coming back? Is mommy gone? Is mommy coming back? I miss mommy. Where's mommy? You know, it just because, but anyway. So yes, a 5-year-old child can and will experience fear. So in a situation where a house is on fire, a 5-year-old's going to be scared, where an embryo, even a baby, wouldn't be scared. Also pain receptors. It's very likely that in an embryo, which would be 2 to 8 weeks gestational age, pain receptors are not developed. Even with, once an embryo matures to a fetus, we're not 100% sure when pain receptors develop. We do know that a fetus in the womb will respond to various stimuli, but if you know anything about biology, there is a bit of a difference between nociception and pain reception. An organism can respond to stimuli without being capable of experiencing pain. Venus flytraps are a great example of that. If you run your fingers over the teeth of a Venus flytrap, it'll close. But a Venus flytrap, not having a brain, not having a nervous system, cannot experience pain. Bivalves are also another great example. Oysters, clams, mussels, scallops. They respond to stimuli, but because they don't have a brain or a nervous system, it's unlikely that they can actually experience pain or even fear. But a 5-year-old, you know, you pinch a 5-year-old, they're going to say, ow. They absolutely experience pain. So in the situation of a burning building, it's likely that maybe that child's skin is starting to blister. Debris that could possibly be hot, ashy, engulfed in flames is falling on that child, resulting in burns to the skin. If the building is literally filling up with smoke, chances are the child is having a difficult time breathing. They're coughing, choking, whatever. But thirdly, the other reason why I would pick up the 5-year-old and take him or her out of the building is because chances are that child has a mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, teacher, sister, brother, cousin, whatever, that would be truly devastated if that child were to die. Whereas I don't know if anybody even has some sort of an emotional connection to these embryos. If we're in a research clinic, probably they were just going to be used for scientific research anyway, which I don't condone that either. But the 5-year-old would also be more greatly missed. That wasn't right. Would be missed more. Greatly missed. Greaterly missed. I don't know. I'm getting weird now. And fourthly, and I actually think this is the most important element of this, because I'm a human, because in a do or die situation in crunch time like that, we don't really have the luxury of thinking critically. And I think that if I saw a crying 5-year-old, I wouldn't even glance at the petri dish full of embryos. I would see a child that is scared, and my human instinct would kick in, and I would just grab that child and run. I don't even think I would see a petri dish. What we do in extremely stressful situations rarely reveals anything about our character. This is why when women are in labor, we kind of give them a free pass to act erratically. That's why husbands don't get too mad when they scream things like, "I hate you," or "We're never having sex ever again. You did this to me." We know that they're in pain and labor is hard. And that's why we kind of give them a free pass to behave, like I said, somewhat erratically when they're in labor. And husbands have to just kind of be kind of patient. And a lot of times these women apologize for the things they said. It kind of reminds me of like the Snickers commercials, like "You're not you when you're hungry." You're definitely not you when you're in labor. I mean, it's an extremely difficult thing for women to do, and I don't think we should be held responsible for the things we say when we are pushing human beings out of our body. I think the same can be said for people who have recently lost a loved one. It used to be like we wear black to funerals, but it used to be that widows would wear black for like a year. So society just, like the people around them knew that they may kind of just not be themselves for a while. Like, I think that's kind of part of the grieving process, is getting back to life before this loss hit you. And again, I wouldn't hold it against a grieving widow if she just spontaneously burst into tears at work. Most times we would tell somebody, get it together. But in the case of a grieving widow, we would kind of give her a free pass. And I think the same is true about these ethical conundrums. What you do in crunch time does not necessarily represent your morals and your ethics. I think that ethics, it's a conversation worth having. The question used to always be, would you steal bread to feed your family? Okay, like if I knew if my girls don't eat tonight, they likely won't wake up tomorrow morning because they're that hungry. Would I steal bread to feed my girls if they were literally starving? Yes, because I value the life of my daughters more than a baker's profit margins. But normally, no, I would not steal bread to feed my girls because I have a means to pay for it. And the moral thing to do is to pay for your food and not steal it from people. But again, if in a crunch situation, like if my girls were starving, I don't think that what I would do in a survival situation, I don't think that necessarily reveals who I am as a person. I think a lot of us would be surprised what we might do in a do or die situation. When that like fight or flight instinct starts to kick in, I think we might be surprised at what we might do. Like normally, I do not condone violence. I have a big mouth, but I'm a bit of a pacifist. But I've told both my girls, like if a stranger ever tries to grab you and I'm not around for some reason, you do whatever you can to get away. And I've told my daughter, I'm like, if some stranger tries to grab you and like put you in his car or something, I'm like, bite, scratch, pull hair, kick, you know what. And I've told her, I'm like, kick them in the private parts. Do whatever you have to do. Scream bloody murder. Fight until you can't fight anymore, because that's crunch time. Like, that's go time. This is your survival. And I mean, if I were to ever be grabbed in like a dark alley or something, I would do my best to beat the living crap out of him. I mean, granted, I'm a 5 foot tall female, so I probably couldn't do too much damage, but I'm going to go down swinging. But normally, I wouldn't kick a man in the private parts, because ouch. Like, I'm not going to just like walk up to some guy and kick him, because again, ouch. But if you are a risk to my safety, yeah, I'm not going to just lay down and let you do whatever you want with me. Like, heck no. Like, are you crazy? And again, this is why I say these hypotheticals are stupid. I think they're just stupid. And I don't like using that word, but they're stupid. Because again, like, if someone broke into your home and you like beat the crap out of them to protect your family, that doesn't make you a bad person. Like, I think even biblically, you have a right to protect your people. And if someone is a risk to your people, your family, do what you gotta do. That's what I have to say. But in the case of abortion, the child in your womb is not a risk to you. And that's what always kills me. It's like, you put an unborn child on one side of the scale and a woman on the other, and you want to weigh them, but that's not what's really going on. We're not telling women that if they give birth to their baby that we're going to kill them. Like, no, we want you to live too. We want you to be well too. And that's why I say all the time that the pro-life movement is fundamentally pro-woman. But you want to know what's anti-woman? What's anti-woman is telling women that they cannot have a baby and a career, that they cannot raise a child alone, that they cannot get through this situation. It is anti-woman to tell these women that their only option is to discard the child in their womb. What is anti-woman is to not give them the facts. What is anti-woman is to not tell them about the number of women who regret their decision, that suffer from PTSD and nightmares, that years later have to face what they've done. That is anti-woman. What is anti-woman is giving men the right to just walk away from their responsibility and not stand by these women who they've impregnated and help them to raise their baby. That is anti-woman. Encouraging women to choose life and standing beside them and saying, we will do whatever we have to do to help you in this situation, that is pro-woman. Telling us that we're a part of the patriarchy. Are you kidding me right now? Like, are you legit? Are you legit right now? Like, is this real life? Oh my gosh. I can't even reason with this kind of stuff. Abortion is 100% anti-woman. It is 100% anti-woman. Life is pro-woman. Ending life is not pro-woman. You can't sit there and say that you're pro-woman and then destroy women in the womb. Doesn't work that way. That's inconsistent. I think it's ridiculous that we live in a society where women feel as if they have to choose between their own life or giving birth, as if like no woman ever has had a career and a child. Like, it's ridiculous. Nobody wants to control women's bodies. This idea that we just want women to be puppets on strings that are controlled by the patriarchy, no, that's a complete and utter lie. We don't want to control women's bodies. We just don't want them to have the right to kill their children. It's as simple as that. Your liberty to raise your fist ends where somebody else's nose begins. And that's always been one of my favorite quotes. Your rights, your liberties end where somebody else's begins. It is mind-boggling to me that we are living in a society that values rights and liberties and freedoms and opportunities, yet children in the womb aren't even given the opportunity to exist. Without the right to life, we have nothing. If people aren't even given the opportunity to live, if they are denied their constitutional right to life, then what have we? What have we as a society if we are denying people the very right to life? And you want to present to me these ridiculous hypotheticals to try to back me into a corner when you want to deny children in the womb the very right to live. Then why not just throw away the entire Constitution? I think I've babbled on long enough, but yes, I would choose the 5-year-old over the petri dish full of embryos. But that says nothing about my view of humans in the womb. I still believe that an embryo, a fetus, whatever, they still have value because God says they do. They are an image bearer of God. They are human, they are alive, and they have value. Just because I would, in a do or die situation in crunch time, I would choose a 5-year-old over an embryo, that doesn't mean that I don't value embryos. I absolutely value embryos because they're made in the image of God. And I think that they should have a right to life. And your argument doesn't shut me down one little bit. You haven't backed me into a corner. I'm not going to change my stance. And if whatever your name, I forget what his name is. Oh, I got to look it up. Where did it go? Why did I forget his name? I've been talking about him for 45 minutes now. Tomlinson, Patrick Tomlinson. If you legit want to have a conversation, if you want to have a conversation about this, I'm ready for you. Let's have a conversation about the ethics of abortion, because here's a real life scenario. You get to choose between letting your child in utero live or die. What's the more ethical thing to do? How about that one? Let's try that one on for size, because that's a real life situation that happens every single day. These women walk into abortion clinics choosing to let their child die when they have other options. That is the least ethical thing that a person can do. And we're not talking about women who might possibly die in childbirth. No, the vast majority of abortions are women that just simply don't want to be inconvenienced with a pregnancy. I know it, you know it, the entire pro-choice movement knows it. But kind of funny how you like to ignore those kind of facts, but whatever. So if you disagree, I would love to have a conversation with you. I would love to have a conversation about the ethics of abortion, because I maintain that there's not a single pro-choice argument that holds any weight. Every single one of them can be and has been debunked. The pro-life position is fundamentally pro-woman, it's pro-child, it's pro-science, it's pro-biology. Truth is on our side. So you want to argue with me? I'm all ears. But being a Christian podcast, I have a feeling that the vast majority of people probably agree with this. And I don't mean to make this an echo chamber. Honestly, if you are pro-choice, if you're a pro-choice Christian or a pro-choice non-Christian, if you support a woman's right to choose abortion, I would love to argue with you, because I love to argue. That's why I have a podcast. And I'm just going to conclude, I guess, with this. Creating hypothetical, ridiculous, ethical conundrums. This is not how you have an argument. If you want to have an argument, okay, then let's open up a real conversation about ethics. Let's open up a real conversation about science and biology. And hey, let's even bring religion into it and talk about that. Let's have a real conversation. Don't create some absolutely ridiculous situation that's never, ever, ever going to happen to try to prove your point, because that doesn't say anything. That's not an argument at all. But anywho, if you've made it this far, congratulations. Despite this, why did I forget his name again? Oh, for crying out loud. Patrick Tomlinson. Why do I keep forgetting this? He's actually, I'd be curious to read his books, because he just looks like an interesting fella. I'm looking at his picture right here. I need to go follow him on Twitter, I think. Oh, that should be fun. What was I saying? I don't remember. Anyway, despite his absolutely ridiculous attempt to put an end to the pro-life argument, I am still pro-life. I don't think that women should have the right to kill the babies in their bodies, because it's not their body. And a human in the womb, it's not a choice. It's a human. Call it an embryo, a fetus, a pregnancy, a tumor, a parasite, a potato, call it whatever you want. It's a human and it's alive. And I don't think any single person should have the right to end that child's life. And your argument has not changed my mind. As a matter of fact, it makes me think that you don't actually have a good argument to continue to support abortion. So you have to come up with the most ridiculous scenario possible that, again, would likely never, ever, ever, never, ever happen. So makes me question the validity of your arguments. So, yeah. But again, if you made it this far, congratulations. I thank you guys for listening. If you're here yet, thank you for listening and continuing to support what we do. If you have not done so yet, be sure to check out our website, which is christiansemotion.org. If you want to debate me, feel free to send me an email, because I don't mean that like aggressively, like come fight me. But if you want to have a legitimate conversation about the ethics of abortion, I would love to talk to you. This includes you, Patrick Tomlinson. See, I remembered your name this time. If you, for some reason, are listening to this and you want to have a debate, I would love to debate you. I'll debate you privately. Heck, I'll debate you publicly. I don't care. But yeah, be sure to check out our website, christiansemotion.org. We are all over the internets. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Come find us, YouTube. And if you want to help us do what we're doing, help us talk about the Christian worldview and how that relates to some of the issues we see in our culture and in our society, then consider supporting us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/christiansemotion. That helps us to pay for some of the things we use, like podcast hosting and our website and softwares, equipment, things like that. So if you want to become a patron, we would love that. That would be great. It would be super helpful to us. And of course, you would get some perks that other people don't get. You'll get some videos and pictures and polls and things like that non-patrons don't get. So anyway, I'm going to sign off here because we're almost at the 1 hour mark. We're at like 51 minutes. So if I babbled on for 10 more minutes, this would be an hour-long podcast. This is one of our longest. The last time I did a podcast this long was when I was talking to Stephen about open theism, which I need to crack that one back open because he backed me into a debate and he admitted to that. I was not prepared to defend the doctrines of grace. I was not prepared to defend Calvinism. I didn't know that I was walking into a debate. So I think I need to have him back on the show and be ready to defend the doctrines of grace, because I can if I'm prepared. But believe it or not, I don't have the entire Bible memorized. And so, yeah, I was just completely not prepared for that. So I think I need to crack that one back open. So, but anyway, thank you guys so much. I will see y'all next week. Hope you had a Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. I guess next time it will be 2018. So see y'all next year. All right, guys. Bye.